And I especially appreciate your inviting us during the monsoon season. I was expecting blisteringly hot weather, and it's actually been cool and gorgeous. So appreciate it very much. So what I'm going to talk about this afternoon is the subject of how business-to-business buying has changed in the US. In particular, that's my area of expertise. And I'm also going to introduce 5 tactics that business marketers today have to focus on in order to be successful in light of these changes. So just to set things off a little bit, I'd like to share with you some fresh data about what's on the minds of business-to-business marketers. Where do business marketing priorities lie? And no surprise, nothing has changed. We still want leads, and we want leads that will close. So, that's what we see perennially in studies about business marketing priorities. But at the same time, as business buyers react to the arrival of the internet, what we're seeing is that how they are learning about the solutions to their business problems has changed dramatically. They are no longer relying the way they used to on trade publications, on resources like trusted partnerships like salespeople. Instead, they're going directly online. So here's some data from Global Spec, which is an an industrial research company that suggests that the top 3 sources of information for business buyers today is online. Now, what this means to us as business marketers is that our prospects are, in effect, shopping without us. They're getting educated online. They're learning about not only the nature of their problem, but what are the solutions online. So this has huge implications for us as business marketers. Now, there's another angle that I'd like to point out, which is not new to business marketing, but seems to be accelerating at a dramatic pace. And this is the nature of business buying. It comprises larger and larger numbers of people. And I think this is primarily because businesses are seeking to reduce their risk. Let's face it, everyone's trying to avoid risk. But what we're seeing is that the so-called buying circle, this is the group of parties in a company who are involved in making a purchase decision, is getting larger and larger, and the number of sales closes that we can expect to take place with only one purchaser involved is down to 7%, as you can see from this data. In fact, the buying circle is getting bigger and bigger. A recent Marketing Sherpa study suggested that with large ticket sizes, large enterprises, the buying circle comprises as many as 21 people. Can you believe that? It means in order to sell a widget, we have to build a relationship with as many as 21 people inside a company to get a decision made. So, what does this mean for us as business marketers? Well, like everyone else, we are increasing our digital budgets. We are trying to be more active advertising online, integrating our online communications with our offline communications. And as you can see from this data from Forrester, like several other industries, the growth in digital budgets in business to business is remarkably high. So what all this means is, to summarize, is that we business marketers need to change our game. We need to be influencing these business buyers, one, while they are online without us researching and getting educated, and two, we have to be able to influence all 20 of those, the gang of 20, you might say, of those people who are involved in the buying process before we can hope to close any business. So this means that our behavior has to change. When I got into business-to-business marketing about 15 years ago, It was a fairly straightforward process. You might even say it was almost like a science more than an art. What you did was you created a funnel of inquiries, you qualified those inquiries, nurtured them if they weren't ready to see a salesperson. Once they were qualified, you handed them off to sales. And there are other best practices, of course, but it was sort of a funnel concept. But now what we as business marketers need to be doing is a much more complicated and therefore I think much more interesting process. We need to be able to build relationships with all 20 of those people in the buying process, make sure we have their contact information, we know what is their role in the buying process, and how to influence them in our favor, because our salespeople don't have a direct relationship with these people at the early stages. Then we database marketers are the ones who have to step into the breach, identify these 20 people, make sure we have their contact information, ability to kick off and sustain a relationship with them so that we can influence them until they're ready to bring in a salesperson and close the deal. So what does that mean? Well, the new tools that we B2B marketers need to focus on, by the way, they're not really new, they're just newly important, are here, and I'm going to talk briefly about each one. The first thing that we have to think about is making sure that our data is as good as it can be. Remember I said we've got to know who are all the buyers in that buying process. We have to have the chance to build a relationship with them. So this means that the quality and availability of business data today has to be a larger and larger focus than ever before. We need to, instead of just saying, oh, I'm going to go rent a list, we need to be managing our B2B databases in a very strategic way. We have to identify which data elements are essential to have. Then we need to try to go get those elements as best we can. The cheapest way to do that is to append them from third parties, of course. It's only pennies per element if we can get that data. But frankly, we're not even going to be able to populate a third of our necessary data requirements with appended data. What instead we have to do as business sellers today is we have to do so-called data discovery, meaning outbound calling or emailing. Usually it's done by phone to fill in the blanks. This is a very expensive process. So we begin with our key accounts, the ones where we really need to develop the relationships first. But this is the imperative in business-to-business marketing today, data management. Now, the second imperative, oh, by the way, I got some new data from Serious Decisions. Anybody in here familiar with Serious Decisions? It's a consulting company that focuses on the business buying process and how it's changed. And they had some interesting hypothetical analysis of what it means to a business seller if the data that they're getting from their vendors is wrong. So you can see, I'm not going to walk you through the numbers, but you can see from this analysis that you're going to be losing as much as half of your sales opportunity if you're starting out with incorrect or incomplete data. Hope that's persuasive. Now, the second thing that we B2B marketers have to be focused on is communications. As I said earlier, we're not talking about funnel management so much as relationship building. And we need to do that in a deliberate way. And this is known, I call it anyway, a contact strategy. So instead of what we've traditionally done, I've worked in large enterprises for most of my career, and I would be, the direct and database marketer in the group, and some product manager would come over to me and say, Ruth, we need a campaign. Has anybody else been in that situation? We need a campaign. Okay, well, that's great. Maybe you have a new product or you have a new solution that you want to bring to market. That makes a lot of sense. But what we business marketers really need to be doing is setting up a series of communications designed to meet the information needs of our targets in a strategic, segmented way so that every piece of communication that we send to them is timed properly against their buying process and is giving them what they need to be well-informed about the solutions that are available to them. So we're talking here about a contact strategy that might be segmented by role in the buying process. It may be segmented by industry size, industry or company size, whatever makes sense in your world. But because contact strategies involve a lot of moving parts, this is not just we need a campaign. These days, best-in-class business marketers are supporting their contact strategies with marketing automation. There's some wonderful new marketing automation systems available today. Some of them are not as expensive as you might think. Many of them are cloud-based and allow a lot of triggered communications, a lot of decision tree type communications that make increase the likelihood that we'll deliver a relevant and welcome message. In fact, this is an example of a kind of contact matrix that we might put together. This one has been segmented based, as you can see the column on the left. This has been segmented by the stage in the relationship that we have with the target. But as you can see, based on the nature of the customer, we're deciding that in the period, it might be a quarter, it might be semi-annually or annually, that we're going to send our inquirers here 6 emails, 1 direct mail piece, 1 phone call, but we're not going to send out a salesman. So that would be the kind of contact strategy that we're setting up deliberately so that we can help manage the relationship and move it along, influence it in our favor. Contact strategies are also widely used today in the case of lead nurturing. When an inquiry has not been qualified, is not ready to hand to a salesperson, you can set up a series of touches designed to move the relationship along, keep connected with that target until he's ready to see a salesperson. That's a contact strategy designed for lead nurturing. Now, as I said earlier, there are all kinds of vendors available to help you with this. Gartner just last month published their so-called magic quadrant of analysis of the top vendors, and they selected Eloqua and Marketo as the happy residents of the upper right-hand so-called magic quadrant. I was glad to see this because Eloqua is going IPO this week, or I guess maybe it's going to be Monday, and I'm planning to put in an expression of interest and see if I can get a few shares myself. So moving on, the third element that I wanted to share with you is the importance of ongoing outreach. And social media is starting to make its way into business to business. Frankly, I and my colleagues are still pretty befuddled by social media. We're not really clear. It's only been around for a few years. We're not exactly sure how best to apply it in the business-to-business marketing world. But the data is suggesting that 90% of us are doing some experiments. So what I'm seeing is that one of the best applications for business-to-business is social media as thought leadership. Here's an example from a consulting company called Maddock Douglas that specializes in innovation consulting. I'm wondering, what is innovation consulting anyway? Whatever it is, they're practicing it. And I was talking with the VP of marketing over there and saying, so how are you guys using social media today? And he said that they have taken a half a body, meaning a half a head count, one guy, who is responsible for tweeting and managing a blog that they're supporting. So the partners in this consulting practice are on the hook to write a blog post once a month, and then their half a head count administrator tweets about it, and this is their way of using thought leadership using social media to establish thought leadership. A really important and useful application if you're a consulting practice and you're trying to be perceived as an authoritative resource in the area of innovation. So I thought that was a reasonable and appropriate application. Now, in my world, I usually focus in the world of sales lead generation. I've done some analysis and figured out how social media can best be applied across the lead generation continuum, and recognizing that if you add an offer, a call to action, and a dedicated landing page, you can in fact turn your social media communications into a lead generator. You can also use LinkedIn and Facebook to identify more details about inquirers and in effect, move them along the process of figuring out whether they're qualified or not. And finally, these communications tools can be used for lead nurturing. So that's my little contribution to the world of where social media fits in the lead generation business. But I've put here a kind of boiled down to-do list for how business marketers might be applying social media tools today. To me, it's really all about generating a response so that you can build a relationship and sustain it over time. So I'll make sure that these slides are available in PDF form afterwards so you don't have to be scribbling down ideas if any of these interest you. Now, the fourth of 5 topics that I wanted to cover is your website. It's remarkable today how few business-to-business marketers are optimizing their website for marketing purposes. I've listed here the essential characteristics of a fine website today. Many of these I'm sure you're familiar with already, but I'd like to call your attention in particular to the last 2, because as business marketers, as I pointed out in my first slide today, the #1 objective of business marketers today is lead generation. And your website can actually be turned into a lead generation machine if you do 2 things. 1, you want to collect data from visitors, and 2, you want to make sure that you're using IP address identification to identify any anonymous visitors who have come to your site. So here's an example of how you can capture data at your website by using a very simple content-based offer and a landing page. Now, I know you're all, as direct marketers, you're all familiar with this technique. Unfortunately, only 1 or 2% of website visitors are ever going to be persuaded to fill out the form. So there's another tool that we should all be looking at. This is IP address identification. Google Analytics offers IP address identification services today for free. There are also paid providers like VisitorTrack, which I'm introducing here, which will send you an email alert that says, okay, yesterday someone from IBM came to your site, poked around, looked at the following web pages, spent how many minutes at each page, and by the way, here's the names, contact information, and titles of the top 5 executives at IBM. And this is a service offering that if our brethren in consumer marketing knew about this, they would be horrified. But in business to business, it's perfectly acceptable practice, and business buyers want to be supported by their vendors. So this IP address identification practice, I think, is an essential part of the B2B toolkit today. Now, moving on to my last topic, I want to mention a bit about content marketing. You all familiar with the term content marketing? It's sort of taken the world by storm thanks to the ease of delivering content through social media today, but it's especially embedded itself in the world of business to business to the point that an entire institute called the Content Marketing Institute has sprung up in Cleveland, Ohio in the last 12 months. And what we're essentially talking about here is a library of content assets, that's white papers, research reports, case studies, videos, documents, material of all sorts that is designed to help influence our prospects, move them along their buying process, and consider us as their trusted partners when they're ready to buy. So the big four applications that I'll leave you with of content marketing and business to business today are: one, thought leadership, as we discussed; two, they're widely used as lead generation offers, like the RSA example I showed you a second ago. They were offering a research report as bait to motivate people to fill out the registration form. By posting a lot of useful content at your website, you're also going to increase your search engine rankings. And finally, content is an excellent application in lead nurturing for keeping that relationship deepening and widening as time goes on. This data in the right is a ranking of the top content marketing formats as they are popularized among business marketers today. It was a study done by the Content Marketing Institute, and I hope that's helpful. So with that, my friends, I have one more point. The content needs to not be sales material. It needs to be informative, relevant, and non-salesy. So please keep that in mind. With that, I'm going to wrap up, and just in a small way, I'd like to promote my book called Maximizing Lead Generation. It's only been out a few months, but my publisher would kill me if I didn't mention it while I'm on the podium here. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.